Hi, folks. Welcome to episode 2 of Wild Wisdom Conversations with Nature with me, Emma O'Brien. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about snakes. Now, who doesn't like snakes? Who's frightened of snakes? I think they're one of the most vilified creatures, along with spiders, which we're also going to be talking about in a future episode. And I'm going to be sharing with you how we can really have some compassion for snakes and how we can really tap snake medicine to help us move forward in our lives. And just a caveat, whenever I talk about any sort of animal medicine, I'm talking about what that animal has to teach us by observing it and intuitively interpreting its behavior patterns and how it responds to its own environment. We're not into harming animals in any shape or form here. So this is all real intuitive, metaphorical medicine that we are allowing the animals to teach us by them being who they are. We don't need to hurt anybody or anything to get benefit from working with an animal. So, to talk a little bit about snakes, they are a creature that, like I say, they're like spiders. People will look at them and be like, oh my God, I hate snakes. They're awful. Snakes, they're slimy. They are not slimy. If you've ever touched a snake, they're really very smooth and very cool, and they actually feel very nice. So when I was busy researching this, I read something that if, as a person, if you were to wipe your hand along the floor, you're going to get dirt on your hand, well, depending on how clean the floor is, but you're going to pick up debris from the floor. Snakes do collect nothing when they go scooting through on a floor in the grass. They just smooth, nothing sticks to them. They're not sticky, they're not wet. They're cool. Snakes are cool. There are almost 4,000 species of snake in the world, and they live everywhere, unlike everywhere apart from Antarctica. So they're like our swallows that I talked about in the first episode, everywhere apart from Antarctica. And they range from teeny, teeny, tiny snakes that can be 10 centimeters long to reticulated pythons, which can be up to 7 meters long. And the snake with the biggest mass is an anaconda, and they can weigh up to 200 kilograms. Now, most snakes will not be out to get you. If you happen to encounter a snake anywhere, the best thing you can do is stay still and let it move past you. They will only tend to strike if they want to defend themselves. They're not ever trying to hurt anybody. It'll only be if they're cornered or threatened. So, like with most wild creatures, if you give them enough room, they will just give you a wide berth too. They are not going to bother you or hurt you. And contrary to what I think we've been led to believe about reptiles, is that they're stupid and they just act on instinct and they don't have any feelings. I know we have to be careful about anthropomorphizing animals. I mean, I love to do it all the time, but we have to be careful about doing that because, I don't know if snakes feel emotion. I couldn't tell you. However, I was invited to revisit and intuitively guided to share with you this wonderful book. It's called The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery, and it's about octopus. And she is a researcher, and she does a lot of work with animals, and her particular fascination is with octopuses and observing their behavior. And she interacted with some at a zoo in Seattle, and they all have different personalities. They seek out interaction. They have people they like and don't like. And octopuses have got quite much bigger brains than snakes, so they are very smart. We might do an episode about that sometime. But there's a bit in this book, the point I'm getting to eventually, where she shares that when we start to treat animals with empathy and kindness, and we start to have a look at how things might be from their perspective, they will respond in kind. And she shares in the book about how the they had lots of trouble with the anacondas in their anaconda exhibit at this zoo. And just as I've shared, anaconda can weigh up to 200 kilograms. And if any snake is going to eat somebody, it's going to be an anaconda. We are in their prey range with a perfect size for a big anaconda to, and they will in the wild, if they're given the opportunity, they might eat somebody if you're in its vicinity. So just stay away from them. They won't eat you. And they'd been struggling with the anacondas in the exhibit. They were having to restrain them at the back of their heads, obviously, because they will bite. And the snakes were getting very distressed. And it was really difficult for people to get them to the vet and get them for their health checks. And they had a volunteer who came in and she started going and sitting with the anacondas. I think she was sitting and reading to them. She sat quietly in the anaconda enclosure. Very brave lady. And after a period of time, people would walk past and they would see this particular volunteer sitting in the exhibit with the anacondas curled up on her lap. So they would recognize this particular woman. And she was clearly very calm with them and very gentle with them. And they responded by seeking out her company and sitting with her. And after she'd spent time with them, and then she also spent time, these anacondas had some babies, and she handled the babies from being very small. And because they'd got used to people and they were handled with kindness, the snakes were never a problem again when they had to take them to the vet. So it's worth bearing in mind when we look at a snake and go, oh, it's stupid, it doesn't have any cognitive abilities. I beg to differ with a lot of that. Do they feel sad? We don't know. But clearly they respond to when they are treated with empathy and respect and kindness, they respond to that. I think most creatures respond to that. So it's a really lovely book. I'll pop the link in the show notes if you are interested in reading more about it. But it just gives a really different perspective on our animal friends, especially the ones that are really quite misunderstood and people are like, oh, it's got no feelings, it's fine. So, how we want to tap snake medicine, sorry, I just digressed completely. We want to look at how does a snake behave? So snakes respond to their environment. They can't self-regulate their temperature. Their temperature is regulated by the environment they're in. So if they are too cold, they need to go and seek out a patch of sun to be able to warm up. If they are too hot, they need to go and find some shade. If the environment is not conducive for them, they move. There's the first little piece of snake medicine for you. They self-regulate depending on the environmental situation that they are in. They don't overthink it because I suspect they don't have the capacity to overthink. Should I move? People are going to think I'm rude if I move, or they respond to their environment. They adapt immediately to their environment and they choose the environment that best suits them. Snakes don't do very much. They will spend most of their time just chillaxing, warming up, cooling off, scooting around. They will go and hunt for whatever they need to eat. And then when they've eaten, they will stay very still because snakes have got rest and digest down to a fine art. So they will literally, they can't do anything if they've swallowed something large and it hinders their movement. They just chill and digest the food. So there's another piece there. Where can you tap that snake medicine of resting and digesting rather than being on the go all the time? Snakes shed their skin, which I think is one of the biggest pieces of snake medicine that we're familiar with. And they will shed between 2 and 4 times a year for an adult snake. Little snakes, when they're growing, they can shed every month, depending on how fast they're growing. Big snakes that are fully grown won't shed as much, but they shed pretty regularly. They don't stay the same. And what happens to prompt their shedding is they will grow and they will get to a point where their existing skin just doesn't fit anymore and it needs to be shed. And a snake shedding is got quite a process that happens with it. Again, a wonderful metaphor for going through the transition and the period of change. In preparation for shedding, it goes into what's known as a blue phase. So in order to get its skin to come off, first it has to regenerate a new skin under the old one. So when it sheds its skin, it's ready to go and its scales and everything are all good and it's protected and it's ready. But in order to be able to get the old skin off, it has to go into a period of being quite quiet. And as a small film of liquid will develop between the old skin and the new skin, a bit like if you're steaming wallpaper off a wall, we have to loosen it. So it has a little film that develops underneath and it goes over their eyes. So if you look at a video of a snake that's shedding, or if you've seen a snake, if you've been lucky enough to see a snake that's shedding, their eyes are covered by like a cloudy blue film, really. Hence the blue phase. And when snakes are doing this, they're obviously quite vulnerable because they can't see very well. They're a bit irritable because they're uncomfortable, and they go into a kind of a quiet phase, this liminal phase. So you may be able to relate to this liminal phase when you are moving from an old identity into a new identity and you are creating change. There's always this liminal phase in between where we're not quite who we once were, but we're not quite who we want to be or where we want to be, and it's uncomfortable. Being in a liminal space is uncomfortable, and you're probably a bit irritable, and you perhaps don't have a very clear perspective on things. It's difficult to have perspective when you're in that in-between phase and you're like, for God's sake, could this shit just move? So for snakes, that is what happens. And then they will get to a point where everything is ready to go, and they will go and bump up against a rock or a plant or a tree branch or something that then splits the old skin. And then they will make sure it kind of try and get it to catch on something, and then it will just, with their body movement and with a bit of friction from grass or whatever they are, it will all peel off in one go, including the eye caps. So these snakes then have this beautiful, fresh perspective on life because they're not having their vision blocked by the little blue cloudy bit anymore. There's just so much in here that you can interpret of using and tapping snake medicine in your own life. This metaphor for shedding and shedding regularly is really powerful, and it's a really important thing to think about. So often we end up unhappy because we cling to wanting everything to be the same all the time, whether it's a relationship or a job or who we are or where we live or what we've got. And life is always in flux. We are beings of nature. We've all forgotten, so I'm here to remind you. We're all part of the natural world, and the natural world is always in flux. It's always in a cyclical change. I'm in South Africa, so I'm in the southern hemisphere. We're moving now from summer into autumn here. And if you're in the northern hemisphere, you're going to be slightly more exciting because you're moving from winter into spring. And it's the change. I can start to pick it up now. The seasons, the change is beginning. There's a little bit of a chill in the air when I go out for my walk around the block in the morning. Just a tiny chill. Some of the trees are starting to drop leaves. The oak trees are starting to drop acorns. So if you start to pay attention, you can see that even though everything still looks very green and lush, it's shifting. And our lives are shifting all the time. But we can get stuck in this blue phase, our own blue phase, where we're not really seeing clearly, we're irritable, we're not moving anything because we're actually so afraid of letting go of the old things in order to create the new. And I think this is where people get trapped so often and get so stuck with the holding on to an old story, holding on to an old identity, holding on to an old way of being that just doesn't work anymore, but you're not quite sure what a new way of being looks like. So it's too scary to move over there. So you're just stuck in this kind of almost shared knot, almost shared knot. And it's an act of courage to shed your skin. And it's an act of courage to choose to see from a different perspective. And we can work with snake medicine to help us do that. A snake sheds its skin and it's fresh and it's vibrant and it's bigger, it's grown, and it can go off out into the world again. So if snake is showing up for you, it is a really powerful sign that is it time to shed something? The other questions that I think are really powerful to reflect upon with snake, when we talk about how snakes adapt to their environment and they respond to cues from their environment, does your environment you're in serve you? Are you sitting in a space that is causing too much friction for you? That you've got your own version of too hot, too cold, uncomfortable, can't move, too much out in the sun, can't get away from this, don't want this, don't feel comfortable. And do you need to make amendments to your environment so you can thrive? And can you respond to the environment around you without overthinking it so much, without thinking, oh, but if I do this, it's going to upset so and so. If I do this, what is somebody going to think? If you channel your inner snake, snake doesn't care. Snake goes, I'm too hot, don't want to be too hot. I'm going to go move into that shade over there. Don't care who sees me, don't care. So tap snake and move where you want to move if it feels better for you. Another thing to think about with snake is what old identity do I need to shed in order to move into the life that I want to create for myself? So often we end up trapped in a comfort zone because of the stories we tell ourselves. Um, it's not possible for me to earn that much money. I've been divorced. I'll always be unhappy in relationships. And what happens is when we keep telling ourselves the same story, we keep perpetuating the same outcome for ourselves. So where can you shed an old story so you can create a new outcome for yourself? Where can you tap snake with that? The other thing to think about with snakes is they're flexible. So where can you be more flexible in your life? They maneuver around and they've got lots of little vertebrae. Each of their ribs works independently. They just kind of scoot and they're flexible. Where can you be more flexible? So I have created a workshop which takes this work a little bit deeper. And then we can start to have a look at where snake fits on the medicine wheel. So I'm referring here to the Andean medicine wheel. So snake or serpent is the energy of the south. It's where we begin on the cycle of change. So we've got the medicine wheel, which takes us through the cycle of change. It takes us through a cycle in life. And we have serpent, which is where do we shed our old skin and shed the past and shed our old stories so we can move forwards in our lives. And it's a really powerful place to sit and work through what are the stories you're telling yourself that keep you in the life that you're in and keep you stuck and stop you moving forwards. So the workshop's really powerful. I'll pop the link in the video here so you can, if you want to take this work a little bit deeper, and I guide you through the process of shedding an old story that is not serving you anymore and helping you to rewrite a new one so you can start to shift and change in your life. So make sure you go and check that out if your interest is piqued by this work. So as I shared in the last episode where I shared about barn swallows, how do we start to tap snake medicine? So pay attention if snake has come slithering into your life. So maybe you're lucky enough to see an actual snake from a distance somewhere safe. Maybe you have an encounter with a safe encounter with a snake and it shows up for you. It's probably more likely, especially if you're living in a city environment, it's probably more likely that you're going to encounter snake in the shape of maybe you see a video on Facebook, maybe you see a picture, maybe there's something in a magazine, maybe you see an article about snake. But maybe you see somebody wearing snake earrings, just be open to how animal medicine can show up for you. So sometimes it's literally the animal, but I mean, if you're working with whale medicine or something, you're unlikely to encounter a humpback whale when you're at the shops. So you're going to see a picture of it. So just be open to how animals communicate. I talked about swallows last time, but birds, sometimes you might see the actual bird. You might see a bird feather. You, again, might see a picture, a video. Somebody might mention it to you. So just be open to how snake starts to arrive for you. And if you keep seeing it show up, what can you learn from working with snake? What is it you need to shed? Where is your environment not helping you? Where can you be more flexible and adaptable? And where can you start to see life from a new perspective so you can start to see some shifts? Thank you for joining me. I'm really enjoying this series that I've created. It's an opportunity for me to I can also ramble a bit more on here. So um, enjoy. And I highly recommend going to check out The Soul of the Octopus book by Simon Montgomery. Like I say, I'll pop a link below to that. It's really important, I think, to start to shift our own perspective about the natural world and the animals that are around us, especially the animals that are really vilified. Snakes really serve a very important purpose in the ecosystem. They eat rodents. They do all sorts of really great work to keep an ecosystem in place, and it's so important that we respect that. So part of the reason of sharing all of this as well is just to see if I can help people shift their perspective on certain animals and just start to have a bit more reverence for them and the place that we all share in the world together. All right. Thanks, folks. I will see you next time. Bye for now.